Got a question for you. Are you driven like an Avenger? You know, what drives human interaction and what drives human progress is a curious thing, in my opinion. It's not always what we think it is on the surface, right? When we go down below the surface level, we might find out some alternate desires. You know, it's been said that necessity is the mother of invention. And I don't necessarily believe that's true. I don't. I think there's a little more to it, that maybe it's not the necessity, but it's the emotion inside the necessity, right? What do you feel when something's necessary? Let me give you a quick example. There's a friend of mine, his name's Grog. Grog is a caveman. He lived a long time ago. He's not really my friend, but I pretend like he is. Seems like a nice guy. And he was probably standing around one day, and he looked and saw this big pile of logs, sticks, and they had to build something out of it. And like everybody else, he looked at it and thought, I got to get these over here. There must be a better way to do it. I don't think he just went, the wheel. Let's just get the wheel to move these from here to there. Here's probably what more likely happened that you and I can relate to. Maybe young Grog looked at the pile and he thought, that girl over there is very attractive. You know, if I could move these logs over there, she might think I'm the best caveman ever. Invent the wheel. It was the emotion. Or maybe he looked over here and said, there's my dad again, says I'm too young and too little to move these logs. I wish I could show him the wheel. And you see, invention, creation, taking something out of nothing is almost always driven by the emotion behind it. So today we want to explore that idea. And not just the emotion itself, but the positive versus the negative emotions. And I find it fascinating because, you know, in today's day and age, there's a lot of talk about positive emotions, which I love, right? Do y'all love positive emotions? You love, come on, wake up and write your gratitude journal every morning. It's wonderful, right? I love feeling grateful. I love feeling happy. I love feeling enthusiastic, ecstasy. Who doesn't love those good feelings? But I'd argue in this kind of counterintuitive time right now that it might be sometimes harnessing the negative emotional side that can drive the most action in the most positive way. So I asked the question, are you driven like an Avenger? And I'm going to get to that in just a second. In order to answer this question, we're going to dive into a playground that I think is one of the best playgrounds to answer this question, the entrepreneur experiment. Now, I like looking at entrepreneurs because, well, I am one. I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years. I started my first business at 21, and I've never received a paycheck from anyone besides me in over 2 decades. I also host a national syndicated podcast and radio show called The Driven Entrepreneur, of all things. And what I do is I interview driven entrepreneurs. Kind of makes sense. It goes with the title. And in there, I uncover the stories. And I'm a big, big superhero fan, as you might have guessed from the title of the talk. Are you driven like an Avenger? I love superheroes. And when I look at these entrepreneurs, I always am curious about, it's like, what's their story, right? How do they become who they are? How do they turn into what they are now? How did this person create something out of nothing? So I call those stories the origin stories, because every good superhero has an origin story, right? And very often, how many of you know the origin story is usually not from a positive place? It's not like, you know, Batman had a loving home growing up for a long, long time, and then he went off to college, and then one day he decided to fight crime. No, something a little worse happened with his parents in the alley after a movie theater. Well, I don't want to ruin the story, but you know what that is. The negative emotion can drive us sometimes more than anything, but the trick is to harness it, to control it, to utilize it, to direct it. And the way to do that is through goals. So I'll share with you why sometimes we're worried about these negative emotions. We've all seen negative emotions like anger run roughshod, right? Revenge. It can get away from us. It can create some negative results, that's for sure. In Britain's mental health organization, according to their statistics, 1 out of every 4 people, a little more than that, are worried about their anger. They're worried about it. Am I too angry? Am I angry too often? Should I not be angry? Someone does something and it violates a boundary, and should I treat them with kindness? And now I have this feeling, and I feel in conflict because I'm supposed to be happy, but I'm really mad, but I feel both. And right, 25% of the people are worried that they can't control their anger. 1 out of 10 people reported being genuinely worried that they can't control it, that it gets out of control, that it's going to go beyond them. And, I don't know anyone, I haven't met one person who at some point didn't witness a parent or a guardian or a loved one lose their temper. I'll never forget the day, my dad doesn't remember this, but I like telling the story anyway because we laugh together about it now, that I wouldn't finish my milk from my Fruit Loops and my cereal. And as I sat down and I ate all my cereal, but I left a whole bowl full of old, gross cereal milk. I'm the only kid, right? Wouldn't finish the milk. And my dad looks over and says, "Why aren't you finishing that milk? It cost a lot of money." And he was a little mad. And I went, "Arr." And he said, "We're going to save it." And he took the bowl of milk and he put it in the fridge, and it sat there for a whole day. Until I'll never forget the sound and the smell. When he brought it back out the next day, it was all sugary and weird. And he looked at me and said, "Fine, I'll drink it." And he drank my old Fruit Loop milk. And he wasn't that mad. But I want to share that story because, it's a little funnier than some of the other times. Because, I grew up with anger in the house like a lot of people did. Not understanding that it could be a positive force if used right. The University of Wisconsin, in their neuroscience department, did several studies, and one of them showed in their results that anger is intrinsically rewarding. It's a cool concept. I like using the word intrinsic because I sound smart. But what it means simply is anger has within itself its own rewards. What does that mean? Negative emotions, generally when studied, are more action-oriented than positive emotions. Do you follow me on that? Negative emotions are more action-oriented than positive emotions. Now, it doesn't mean it's good action, right? That's where you come in, Mr. or Mrs. Avenger, okay? That's where you come in. But they generally have more action associated with them. So contentment, happiness, right? How much action is in contentment? When I ran the marathon and I finished and I hit the finish line and I sit back and go, I'm done. It's like contentment breeds relax. But if I'm frustrated and I feel stuck and I'm angry about it and I'm not happy about it anymore, and how many of you have ever known someone who maybe was overweight or had bad health, and one day they just woke up and went, "You know what? Not another day, not another minute. I'm done. I'm frustrated. No, I'm not happy with how I am. No, I'm not just going to learn to love myself, my perfect self-image." It's like they actually recognize, I don't like what's happened to me, and I want to do something. No, I don't want the participation trophy, Mom. I want to win at the game of life. I want to do something different. And they got frustrated, and frustration made a breakthrough, and it changed. So are you with me so far? If you are, let's talk about you. I want to have a conversation about you for your own little fun. And we're going to have a little bit of fun with this, because the question, are you driven like an Avenger? Are you driven from maybe a righteous anger? Maybe you're frustrated with something, and can you drive that towards goals? Remember the study from the neurology department, or the neuroscience department from the University of Wisconsin, said that it was intrinsically rewarding. What they also uncovered, which I found fascinating, was that in the emotion of anger, you can do two things. If it's directed towards a goal, which is the secret, if it's directed towards a goal, that anger can rid you of obstacles. So you can actually use the emotion as fuel to overcome obstacles. And the second thing they found it does is very often makes you more resourceful. Again, if I'm frustrated with my situation in life or frustrated with my environment, I can get more resourceful and find a way, make a way, move something, move the obstacles. If I don't have that same level of emotion, I might not get to the same goal. So to understand this a little better, we're going to dive into 3 areas, just 3, real simple, make it easy for y'all. 3 areas and 3 Avengers that utilize their emotion to create their goals. Now, why did I pick Avengers? Well, because I'm a big superhero fan, and Marvel's way better than DC. So I just decided to go with that. Now, I said 3. I'm actually going to give you a 4th one. We're going to go 3 examples and 1 warning. Let's start with the warning first. You all probably know someone in your life, or have known someone, that's like the first Avenger. Let's go Incredible Hulk. You remember Hulk, right? Hulk, smash! And Bruce Banner turns into the Hulk. He has no control on his emotions. And even Bruce Banner knows when he has no control over emotions how dangerous he can be. Because we follow the Avenger journey along, all of a sudden we find in one of the movies, Bruce Banner hides out. They can't find him. He's hiding in a cabin all by himself. Why? To protect the ones he loves. Because he doesn't want to hurt people. You see, there isn't a lot of positive benefit from the anger inside the Hulk. And I think I can relate to that. I feel that sometimes. I feel, I have a 10-year-old son, and I love him to pieces. And there's moments when I go, Matt, back away, count to 10, because I'm going to say something that's Hulk. And I don't want to be Hulk, because I don't want my son to see that. I want to use a different fuel with him. I want to be able to shape the emotional experience a little bit differently. So every now and again, I find myself hiding in the cabin. So the warning is anger with no goal or direction. See, Hulk can't think. His cognitive process is gone. He's only emoting, and he runs roughshod over the city. He's flipping over cars. He's hurting people, even friends accidentally. So we know we don't want to do that. Agreed? Yep. You can say yes, no? Agreed. We don't want to do that. So let's talk about the 3 examples and see which Avenger you relate to the most. The first one, and I'll share a quick story from the entrepreneur space for each one, because I think there's some interesting characters in history that have that relate to these. So I like to name and identify things. So the first one I'll call the Captain America. And this is avenging regarding people. Okay, so the 3 areas are people, product or item, and personal. Sometimes the anger is about the other person. There's someone who gets to us. Someone who held you down, someone who said you weren't good enough, someone who said it can't be done, whatever the story is. Captain America is all about the people, right? He wants the people to prosper. And when I think of history, there's a young man that comes to mind. This is back in 1958. He was a World War II mechanic, and he started a business repurposing these World War II engines. He worked on these diesel engines and turned them into farm equipment and tractors and whatnot. Pretty cool, right? And one day his business gets so big and so popular, he's actually making good money, he wants to reward himself. He lives out in Europe and he thinks, you know what? I've earned it. I never thought I'd have one, but I want a sports car. And he's a mechanic, so he goes to the only place that you can get the world's best sports car, to Italy, to go get a Ferrari. And as he walks in to get his Ferrari, he buys it, he's very happy, he drives his Ferrari home. And as he's driving around, he notices a few additions, modifications he might be able to do to the engine to make it a little better. I mean, he's a mechanic himself, right? So he knows that, if I tweak this, if I made that, it might ride a little better. And he knows that Enzo Ferrari, the founder of Ferrari, he lives close by, he's in Italy. He's like, I'm going to go pay him a visit. So he goes to see Enzo Ferrari and offers his suggestions. Ferrari's not very happy to receive it. In fact, so unhappy that he dismisses him completely. Says, I'm not going to take advice from a lowly tractor mechanic like you. I invented the sports car. Get listen to you. And he sends him on his way very dismissively. Well, Ferruccio Lamborghini decided that he wanted to start his own business. And he was going to create a rival sports car that would be better than the Ferrari. You see, the rivalry still exists today. If Lamborghini went home and went, you know what, calm, I'm grateful that Ferrari told me these negative things about me, and I'm going to feel good about it. Again, I'm not belittling feeling good, but I think it's interesting that today we can tell a story from 50, 60 plus years ago about a man who felt belittled, who felt talked down to, and went home angry and decided to do something positive about it. The second Avenger, so see if you relate to that. Have you ever done something in your life that was despite someone, to prove someone wrong, to show them that you could do it anyway? Maybe you didn't like what they were doing and you thought, you know what, I hate the way this restaurant does their service. I'm going to make a better one and do a better service. Maybe. The second Avenger, in the positive light we're going to talk about, is the Iron Man. See if you relate to Iron Man. Now, Iron Man is the innovator. It's about the product. And have you ever had a product that was just user unfriendly? annoying, and you're like, why did they make this thing the way they made this thing? And some people get frustrated with a product, and nowadays it's sad. Nowadays we go, oh, I can't believe this product. 1 star on Amazon. Wish I could give 0 stars. And we do this keyboard warrior from the basement thing. What if instead you decide to do something about it? There's a young man that decided to do something about his terrible vacuum cleaner. See, he had a vacuum cleaner at home years back, and, well, the suction power was no good. And he traced back he was an engineer, and he traced back the suction power to the bag. And he thought, this bag is interrupting this, and there must be a better way. And then he got to thinking about it and realized, you know what? These bags are expensive. Like nowadays, you ever bought a printer and you realize the toner is more expensive than the printer? Who's done that, right? Sure. And back in the day, right, when I was a kid, it was the vacuum cleaner was cheaper because you had to replace the bag every 3 to 6 months, and the disposable bags are what got you, right? So the vacuum industry was actually a locked-up monopoly of these, higher-ups that were just like, I'm going to sell everybody vacuum bags, and they're going to get them every few months, and they're going to be beholden to me and their money. And this guy, this engineer, decided to start experimenting with a better solution. And he experimented and experimented and experimented, and 5 years later, 5,127 experiments later, Sir James Dyson created the first ever, that's right, the first ever cyclone science, a bagless vacuum. Now you'd think, with a breakthrough like that, it would take the world by storm, but not so. He had to let his frustration and his righteous anger towards the vacuum industry fuel him further to keep moving his product forward, because he lived in Great Britain. And guess what? That was a monopoly, and they didn't want to see their vacuum bag sales go down. So he ended up kept pushing. He finally got his vacuum into Japan. He licensed it in Japan, and he used the royalties and made enough money to make a research facility to make it even better. He made the next model. He got a license into America, and all of a sudden, with America behind him, with Japan behind him, with a research facility behind him, he now had the clout to become Sir James Dyson, to finally get the vacuum you probably have at your house. When you go to Target today, you probably see a line of vacuums, and not one of them has the old godforsaken bag. Anger, when used and directed towards a goal, can fuel you for great things. And I want to close with one last story and one last Avenger. I want you to see if you relate to this one. Sometimes it's personal. And it's more than the story we heard from Ferrari and Lamborghini. It's real personal. And maybe you had someone in your life that told you that you weren't going to be enough. Maybe you had someone in your life growing up that belittled you or bullied you or did any number of things that would cause you to believe the lie that you're not enough. And if you believe the lie you're not enough, you might have to go out and prove that you are. Now, although I don't like that, I do like the result if you can recognize that it was a lie, because it can still fuel you for greatness, And there was a young man who, he went to school, 11 different schools, several different countries over his life, back and forth, New Zealand, back and forth in Ireland, Northern Ireland, in England. And he has to do with the story of J.D. Wetherspoon. Now, for anyone who's not English, including me in the audience, J.D. Wetherspoon is the Great Britain's most foremost pub, hotel, restaurant chain. They have the largest market share of 8.2% of all of the business. It's a pretty big deal. It is the most beloved and criticized pub, hotel, restaurant chain in the entire nation. But most people love their Wetherspoon. So who's J.D. Wetherspoon? No one. This huge achievement is not named after the founder. Tim Martin, who founded J.D. Wetherspoon, came up with the idea of J.D. is J.D. from Boss Hogg from Dukes of Hazzard, because he just liked that character. That's where it came from. And when he was in primary school in New Zealand at the time, there was a teacher that said to him, and I quote, "You're never going to amount to anything," because he couldn't get his studies under control. He couldn't get his storytelling under control. He couldn't get his talking under control. And he couldn't focus like so many of the other kids. He didn't sit straight, fold his hands, and wait to be called on. He had ideas. And you might relate to maybe back in the day and even today in certain school atmospheres, you get in trouble for doing what we would now call networking. For being an entrepreneur, for being an influencer, for connecting the dots with people, for helping people. You're trying to help your friend next door. Excuse me, do you want to share with the class? No, but my friend I just wanted to help them because they asked me a question. See, I learned not to do that in 3rd grade. And then if I go into the business world and I do that, then I'm out of business. Well, Tim Martin decided that it didn't matter what that teacher said, and he was going to go for it anyway. And after 11 schools, several countries, lots of failures, a few successes, he started his first Weatherspoon and decided to name his now 925 location, multi-$100 million, approaching $1 billion organization after his 3rd grade teacher in New Zealand, Mr. Weatherspoon. The one who said, "You're never going to amount to anything." I wonder if there's a little voice in the back of Martin's head that says, "Oh yeah? To prove a point, I'll show you." So as we wrap our time together, I want to ask you the question again. Are you driven like an Avenger? Could you be driven like an Avenger? Is it maybe the people? Are you the Captain America? I'm going to prove a point. Is it the product that frustrates you, and instead of being frustrated and leaving a review, you're going to go do something about it? Make it better? The great Buckminster Fuller, one of my favorite quotes of all time, I might just tattoo it on my body one day, he said, "Don't spend any time destroying the old system. Instead, build a new system that makes the old system obsolete." And I would add, use your emotional fuel. Use your emotional fuel, never let it down, but always decide to direct it in a goal. And you too can be an Avenger. Thanks so much.